Hello everyone, David King here, and today I want to show you an animation playhead. So as usual, I'm going to show you an example app, walk through the source code, and all the sources are available on GitHub. So let's have a look at that example. What I've got here is an explicit animation, and just to clarify, an explicit animation is when you have an animation controller and you use that controller to drive changes within your widget tree. An implicit animation is when you use a pre-built widget that has its own animation controller, and so you don't have to think about it. So with this explicit animation, what I've done is I've used the example from the staggered animations page in the Flutter docs. And so as you can see, there are various parts to this animation, which is why we call it staggered. It fades in, it widens, it moves up, it changes color, and the border radius changes. And so the animation playhead is this widget at the bottom here. So as you've just seen, I can play it in reverse, I can pause it. I can also use this slider to scrub through that animation. And this is great if you want to make fine changes to your animations. So let's just jump on over and have a look at the source code. So what I have in my main.dart file, I've just got my home page. And my home page, to scroll up, is a stateful widget. And when I initialize this widget, I create my animation controller. And as you can see, when I dispose of this widget, I also dispose of that animation controller. And this is just an explicit animation best practice. So you'll be doing this all the time anyway. So what do I do with this controller? If we just have a look at the build method here, I pass it into two widgets rather. So I pass it to stagger animation and animation playhead. So stagger animation, like I said, is just the staggered animation from the Flutter docs. I've got the link up here. And if we just walk through this, we've got this controller, which is driving all these different tweens. So we have opacity, width, height, padding, border radius, and color. So let's just have a look at those. We have opacity, width, height, padding, and color all in one go, and border radius at the end there. So that's that animation, and that has been driven by an animation controller that we pass in to that animation. So our animation playhead is the widget that I've built, and this is a stateful widget that again expects an animation controller. And here what I'm doing is I've got a few things going on, and it's a little bit subtle, but quite easy to understand once I walk through it. So when I initialize this widget, I add some listeners to that animation controller. So basically whenever the value changes or whenever the status changes. And again, I'm disposing of these as necessary. So what do I do when these listeners are triggered? Well, all I do is I run set state with no value. Why am I doing that? Let's have a look. So let's scroll down and just think about what's happening here. We're going to focus on this slider. Now the slider has a value that is matching the widget controller value. So it's using the widget controller value. So whenever that changes, this slider needs to re-render. So that is why we are triggering set state. So whenever we trigger set state, this build method is triggered and our slider is being re-rendered with that new value. So that just means that when we press play, that value is incrementing up from 0 to 1. And each time, all the way along, it's triggering set state so that we know how to render our slider. You'll notice something else here. Whenever that slider's onChange method is called, we're just setting the controller value. Now, typically, you would also run set state here. But why are we not doing that? Well, think about the life cycle here. So we are setting the controller value. So that's changing our animation. Whenever that value changes, this listener is triggered, which again runs set state. So it's pretty straightforward. It closes the loop. The other two things we have here is an icon button, which controls the forward and pause status. And then we also have the reverse and pause status. So that's these functions here. So this widget is pretty straightforward, but as you can see, even just looking through this example, you can use it to have some fun with your animations. Now, all my sources are, as usual, available on GitHub. So go to github.com/udavid/flutterby. There'll be a link in the comments and star this. I have one repo for all of my YouTube examples. So as you can see here, there's just 6 examples, but it's going to grow every single week. So this is going to be a great resource for just finding, fun little widgets or code examples, snippets that you can use in your projects. And if you want to learn more about staggered animations or explicit animations, the Flutter docs are always a fantastic place to start. But if you do want to know more, please leave some comments and I will, of course, get back to you. So I hope you all have a fantastic day, and that's all from me. So toodaloo.